Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host Jacob Shorba, and today I want to discuss the cap situation for the Jacksonville Jaguars following the 2023 NFL Draft. So with that said, let's go ahead and hop into this. So I'm doing this on Over the Cap. Anyone who's watched this channel before knows this is what we use. Not everything is updated in here as of now, so there's some things I want to clarify first of all. At this moment, the rookies that have been added onto the team are not on here yet, so that will be changed at a point. We already know the cap numbers. We do know what the rookie pool is going to be. We know the effective cap change. We also know how much these players are going to cost next year. So for this season, the cap change is going to be around $3 million or $3.1 million, just over that. So you're going to go down to around 11 million available in cap space. And then the future season, with all 13 rookies, the combined cap hit of all of those players will be 15.8 million in the 2024 NFL season. So we'll also factor that in when we discuss the future of the team and really the health of the salary cap for the Jaguars. Now, things I think will change. So obviously, all the rookies are added on, right? And this would effectively be $11 million. Now, it will either be at $11 million or get better based on who makes the team, because there may be players who are paid less that make the roster. That's always possible. So it could improve, but it's going to be very marginal numbers. Now, I do think for the Jaguars, they are going to bring in some veterans, probably starting tomorrow on Monday. So, some players we could talk about. I believe one of them you can maybe throw out there if you want is a guy like Casey Hayward, a backup for the outside at cornerback. They could want that kind of player because this team, quite frankly, does not have a backup to that position. If you have Tyson Campbell or Darius Williams go down, I mean, who do you got? Like, we look at our depth chart we used the other day on here, and I have updated this based off of some stuff that we've heard from the team. Your backups, it starts with Tavon Campbell. I don't feel comfortable with that. So I do think the Jaguars need to go find someone. A guy like Casey Hayward, he played pretty solid. Not a guy who's going to blow you out of the water, right? But he's going to be a veteran. He's going to be able to start if needed. And you could get a guy like that, I think, for maybe $3 million on the season, which isn't a huge cap change. It'd be about $2 million because the guy you're replacing gets paid probably veteran minimum, just south of $1 million. So getting a guy like Casey Hayward would help you out. And he was getting paid, I think, $5 million by Atlanta before they cut him. So there's a good chance that what he gets paid by another team will go down. Now, some other names we could talk about. You get guys like DeJuan Smoot, obviously, where he was here before. We're really just monitoring the injury to him and seeing if he's going to come back with the team. And I think this first year back, if he does return, it's going to be a one-year deal. I don't think he's going to get a long-term deal with any team because they don't know what he's going to be when he returns. So you're probably paying him a small amount. Might not be available the whole season anyway. So maybe like a $2 million cap hit. Something that's pretty nice for the team this year, and then he gets paid after that as long as he's still, able to perform well. You could also talk about a guy like Justin Houston, where Justin Houston would really help out this team, adding another pass rusher, a guy who's mainly played on passing downs, in a limited role now, about 500 snaps a year, but is super productive. Ends up getting almost 10 sacks last season for Baltimore, despite not being on the field all the time. That's the kind of player that I think this team could target. And you also look at Houston, you see a really good leader. And they care a lot about that, and it makes him a pretty clear and obvious fit for the team. But if we're going to see any of those moves, it's going to start tomorrow. You could also have Jacksonville want to go, say, make a big trade. They could go after a guy like Buda Baker still. The issue will be that they have to be very creative about the way they approach that, because the only picks next year that aren't tied up currently in the Calvin Ridley trade that are worth enough value to even really move the sticks on a deal is your first rounder, which is too much, and then the Saints fourth rounder that you acquired yesterday in the draft. That's really it. And obviously, like, we expect the Jaguars to probably give up a second to Atlanta because they will probably extend Ridley in some shape or form. So, that third should be available. They might just, if they make a trade like that, say, hey, we'll give you this third, might give you a fourth too, but we'll have a conditional clause in here to where if that goes to Atlanta, this deal changes. And so they have to be creative if they want to do that, but they can't. It just complicates it, is the main thing. So I think that's going to change the cap. If I had to estimate what happens, I think DeJuan Smoot does return to this team. We'll throw him on here just for the sake of kind of seeing how things sit. Let's say he gets paid $2 million. I don't think that's anything crazy. I don't think that's a number that's not that realistic. So you bring him back on a really cheap deal. He was getting $5 million a year before, but he's going to have to sign a prove-it deal just because of the Achilles tear. I don't think they'll sign 2 edge rushers. I mean, I would love to get Justin Houston, but I won't put him on here for that sake. I do think they need a backup on the outside, so we'll go after a guy like Casey Hayward. And let's say we give him $3 million on the season, 1-year deal. So change your cap a little bit here. So we've got $3 million we're going to subtract from this because of the draft class coming in, which is not accounted for on here yet. So you're essentially sitting around, $7.8 million available. So just something to note. Now, this will continue to change, and here's the reason why. We learned, I believe it was either Wednesday night or Thursday morning, after a bit of speculation on it, that Cam Robinson he's going to be suspended because of a PED substance abuse. So I'm expecting that to be 6 games. It's anywhere between 4 to 6 usually. So I think he'll be gone that long. We had it confirmed that every game he misses will be about $888,000 that the Jaguars will not have on their books for the season. And so Robinson's going to lose out on some money. And while you hate that you're not going to have him available for those first 6 games or however many games it is, I do think that it is nice to save that salary cap, try to skate by, and you clearly have the players to get that done. So I kind of look at it as a blessing in disguise. That's just my opinion. And so, I think there's also a possibility that things go a little different with Cam Robinson than just that. So what we learned today, when Doug Peterson was talking about Anton Harrison, the draft class, all those conversations, right? He said that Anton Harrison is the starting right tackle. That's where they're going to put him. And the way he talked about it is very similar to the way they talked about Trayvon Walker. They said he's a 3-4 outside linebacker. That is where they played him the entire season, and they said they might move him around after that. Now they're talking about moving him around. So essentially, the precedence is there for that kind of conversation to mean probably a year of playing in that position. So what I expect is for Anton Harrison to be the Jacksonville Jaguars right tackle for the entire 2023 season, as long as he's healthy. So what I think is going to happen, and this is all projection, right? You have him starting on the right. Walker Little played really well last year. He played just as good as Cam Robinson did. He's doing it on a rookie deal as well. I think what's going to happen is I think Walker Little is going to keep that job. And I think the Jaguars are going to tell Cam Robinson that he needs to play left guard. and he can be the swing tackle. Because you need to put your best 5 on the field. And if he plays left guard for you, that's great, right? And you'll accept that. And you can move on from him at the end of the season. Obviously, he's going to be overpaid for that. But the other route that I think is better and think is potentially more possible and more likely is that Cam Robinson says, hell no, I ain't playing guard. And he wants to go to a team that needs a tackle. And obviously, like, Cap's not amazing, but here's the thing. A team is acquiring him and paying him, what, like, just north of 10 million? Probably like 11.7 million, I think, on the season, because he's going to miss those games. And then after that, nothing is guaranteed in that contract at all. So for Cam Robinson, you know, I think that there's a chance he could get traded. I think there's a chance there's suitors, and he will come back off that injury, have a little more time to rest, a little before that trade deadline hits. So it's going to be a post June 1st trade. Like, that's pretty much guaranteed. You see the team saves $17 million. That number goes to the new team. However, they're not going to have all of that because he's going to be suspended. So with his suspension, the Jaguars this first year would save around $12 million. They can carry that over to the next season, and they'll also save money then. So this is just my gut feeling. I could be wrong, but I think the way that things are trending, the situation, the player they picked, I think Cam Robinson is going to want out of Jacksonville because he feels like he is a starting left tackle, and he's going to go to a desperate team before the trade deadline. You get draft capital out of that. You know, at that point, I don't really care how much you get. Just get something. You know, even if it's a 4th rounder or a 3rd rounder, like, you'll gladly take that. A team's going to be desperate for him. You trade him away. You see all that money that Jacksonville would save from that. And that is what I personally expect to happen. So now you've got still a really good offensive line with Walker Little, Anton Harrison. You've got Ben Barch at left guard, Luke Fortner, and you've got Brandon Scherf. And you've got depth behind these guys. So you feel good about that. And if Cam doesn't get traded and he wants to play left guard, you'll accept that too. You know, you're obviously not going to get a draft pick out of it, but at the same time, he's going to be a really good left guard for you if he plays in that role. There's a lot of people who even talk about him as being more of a guard. Might be better for him. So I'll accept that if that happens, but I think he's going to get traded before the trade deadline. So with that conversation, there's one last thing I want to mention before we look at the cap in 2024. So I think Evan Ingram, out of all the players we have right now, is the most likely one to get extended out of the big deals that are coming up next year. Devon Hamilton obviously already got extended. You know, maybe you see small ones with a guy like Ben Barch that they want to keep around. Say they want to. You could see it with Tyler Shatley if he wants to continue his NFL career. I don't know if he will at 33. That's the decision he'll have to make. He absolutely could, but I don't know. I mean, Brandon Linder retired relatively early, so there's precedence for that on this team. Now, I think the one player that will have an extension negotiated will be Evan Ingram. And while I think that will happen before the season is over, I do think that it's not going to impact the cap space for this season because there's no need for it. Unless you're making a huge acquisition and you're signing him then, you don't need to change the cap this year because you already have enough. So just have your small cap hit in the future. So we'll work on his deal in 2024. That's where we'll kind of change the numbers, have him extended, but we'll give you an idea of how this looks. So this is your roster. We brought in a couple guys, you know, and it may be different names, but you're probably going to see contracts like this. You're probably going to see these positions get hit and just shore up this team. And I think Cam Robinson will be traded before the trade deadline. Now in 2024, you got a lot of cap space here. This is a massive projected jump. However, this is the expectation right now. And with this number here, you're carrying 25 million because you got to keep in mind that we have a $3 million cap change not on here from the draft class getting signed. So, $25 million being brought over to 2024, if that is the case. You've got roughly 64 million here. So, you add those together, you're at $89 million in cap space. That's a lot of freaking money. So, we look at this, we see how many players are under contract. That's the first thing we need to consider. So you're at 32. If your 13 guys stick around, which I don't think they all will, I think there will be guys who do get moved on, who do get on other rosters. That happens, but generally the cap hits will be the same for those bottom guys because they're always around $1 million. Adding in the 13 rookies, and then if you want to replace some of the bottom ones with normal players that are getting better in minimum, 15.8 million is the cap change. So, still a massive number to work with. There would be 45 players under contract at that point. You've got 89 million, you subtract 15.8, it's roughly 73 million available in cap. So basically 9 million more than what we have here. Not only do you just have 3 players, and they are big time players to be fair, to re-sign at this point, but you have several guys you can consider moving on from. So the cap situation is fantastic, and I'm shocked that they were able to negotiate it this well to this point. And obviously this includes the projection of Cam Robinson getting traded. I do think that's going to happen though. If we extended Evan Ingram, I think you're probably looking at 14 million a year. I think he drives it up a bit. I don't think he gets anything insane though. So if that's your number, you add this on. So essentially how we negotiate these and kind of copy what Jacksonville does. We take what he's getting paid per year minus the base salary for the first year. This is the least they can pay him. And that's your signing bonus because this is what he gets in his pocket, 14 million that first year. So it's the easy way of writing these. And these are your cap hits. So you're still backloading at this point. Josh Allen, I think he will perform better. I think he will get extended. But I don't know if that's going to happen this year now because the team did say this morning they expect him to take a step forward. If they feel like he needs to take a step forward, they might not be willing to give him the extension before that. They may want to wait and see. If he does, though, excuse me there, you're probably talking about a deal just shy of 20 million a year. So let's say 19 and a half. And that could be different. But we'll project it high because I just want you guys to understand where the cap space is right now and how good of a situation they are in compared to what they were before. So these are your cap hits. About 7 million that first year, and that's 25, 26 million roughly. Kind of looks like your Christian Kirk contract, except this is for 3 years. And they could do longer if they want, but we'll do 3. That's about the length that they're doing on deals. As far as other big players, we got Calvin Ridley. I do think with Ridley, there's a good chance that he plays pretty well and the team struggles to come to a contract with him. This is obviously projection, right? Like, we need to see what happens, but I think there's a chance that he's just in a situation where he's kind of like Evan Ingram. Comes in, overperforms, gets franchise tagged that first year, then they work out the deal. Think that's possible, and so we'll just do that instead. So you have Calvin Ridley getting the franchise tag here. He'll have a small cap hit in 2025 if you bring him in that next season or extend him long term. You look at who you got left here. These are small contracts. I think obviously Riley Patterson you expect to come back. Jamal Agnew you'd re-sign. He'd be a decent amount of money. So he gets like just south of $5 million a year. Let's say we give him $5.5 million a season. So your number would be That right there, I believe. And this is your contract with him. You have your 13 guys you add on. So you're at 50 players here. We'll throw in one more just so we can get to the 51, because that's how many count against the cap. So let's say, for example, Josh Wells sticks around for another year. He got like the minimum, but let's say they want to pay him $1.5 million. So you are sitting with $34 million in cap space. Now, how we got the number, once again, with all the calculations we did, how much you're carrying over, how much your rookie class costs, because you're carrying about $25 million, right? And then your cost from the cap hit of adding on these rookies, the 13 you have, is 15.8. Roughly $9 million is the effective change. So we're talking about $34 million available. That is with no one being cut from the team in 2024. And if you didn't trade Cam Robinson, you are still okay here. So you're still above the cap. And then you'll have your cap change, obviously, from signing your draft class, like $3 million again, probably picking around the same range. You're still good. And now, even with that, you have opportunities to move on from players you feel like could be replaced on this roster. So we talked about Cam already, but another one I think is very possible at this point would be Rayshawn Jenkins. Because with Rayshawn Jenkins, Antonio Johnson, your pick at 160, that quite frankly should have gone a heck of a lot higher than 160. Very similar prospect. They look at him as a safety. I think he's going to perform really well. I think he's a player who's going to have a chip on his shoulder, and I will not be one bit shocked if he takes over at the safety position alongside Andre Sisco after this next year. I think Rayshawn's a player you can move on from. He's a guy you can cut. Now, obviously, like if he performs as good as he did before, keep him around, but it's a lot that he did in 2022. I mean, he won a lot of games for you. He had a ton of big moments. Like, I'm not advocating that I don't like him or I don't want him on the team. My point is that it's hard to follow that up. And so I think there's a good chance for Rayshawn, unfortunately, that he has a season that's not as good. He has the big cap hit, and so you end up moving on. Now you see you save about $5 million. However, he's one of the players that had these void years. If you end up cutting him, you will notice the future years go down, or go up as far as the amount of cap space you have, go down in your expenses, because those void years move forward to the season you cut him in the scenario we're doing. So you see 2025, $4 million opens up. So you've essentially, if you cut a player like that the year after restructuring him, you're just pushing cap hit from this year all to the next season. If you keep him around for the rest of the contract, then it's across all the void years that you had. So, Rayshawn Jenkins, going to be one of the guys that you can move on from this next season if you want. Brandon Scherf will also be an option, because if he doesn't improve his level of play, he is a very highly paid player. And you could find a guard in the NFL draft to start. You can find someone in free agency who can play just as good if he doesn't take a step forward and earn significantly less. So Brandon Scherf is also a player that you can move on from. Hopefully he takes a massive step forward, sticks around with the team, but if he doesn't, you can move on from him. I think Darius Williams sticks around. I understand that this is $10 million that you can save here, but at the same time, he played great on the outside. He's got to get turnovers, but he was really good at locking down receivers, preventing receptions. He was effective for this team. One thing I did forget to note, Brandon Scherf has the same situation as Rayshawn because he was restructured. So you see when we do this, the cap hit changes in 2025. You save $8 million there. You save $9 million this year too. So that's what we're looking at. So you're freeing up all this money with players that have already been replaced or can be replaced. Brandon Scherf would be the one that you would still need to replace, and you'd have plenty of cap space to do it. So that's the one guy you would need to replace in the 2024 offseason. Now, other options here, Christian Kirk's not going anywhere. Aluakon, I think, is going to stick around for his whole deal. Great player. No reason to move on. Bafadakasi, he's definitely one you could do it with. He was restructured, so you see the same thing there. But I think you can replace him. You added to the defensive line as well heavily during the draft. I think Roy Robertson Harris sticks around for years to come. Not worried about that. And Zay Jones, I also think he's a receiver that sticks around. You don't have the replacement on the roster right now, and I don't think he has a bad deal with the team at this point. So those are the moves you really have available. There's not much else you can do on here that's going to move the numbers. And obviously, if you're moving on from these guys, then you're going to have to add in players. It's going to change the cap a little bit. But in this scenario, you would have north of $50 million available. You would need a guard, and you would need to upgrade any other issues that came up on the team. Just things that happen every year, right? Like, we didn't think corner was a problem last year. It became a problem. So things will happen, and the team will have to address it, but you'll have the draft picks for that. You'll have plenty of money for that. You'll have room to make big deals. This is the cap situation that Jacksonville's sitting in. And this is just 3 players short of the 51-man roster. So point is, of all of this, the way Jacksonville navigated this offseason, whether or not you love the players they got, whether or not you love that they took a more conservative approach to the offseason, the cap situation is so much better than what it was before. And there is ample opportunity to get around it, even if they don't want to move on from all these players. I mean, you saw on here that if they wanted to, like, they could keep Cam Robinson. They could keep those 3 tackles, have enough money, and they may not even have to restructure people down the road. That's the situation they're in right now. So, as much as there were things that were frustrating during the offseason, skipping out on certain players or losing guys or not picking a guy in the draft that you feel like is an absolute home run pick available 100 spots after what he should be, the team has still done a very great job at navigating the salary cap, and that is something that we can hang our heads on. So, I appreciate you guys watching this video. I appreciate your time this offseason. I appreciate everyone who's stuck with this channel throughout much of the free agency process, the draft process, all of that. The plans from this point on probably won't be like videos every day, right? Because not as much is going to happen. I would like to review the draft prospects, give them each a video. Maybe not every single one, but definitely guys like Anton Harrison, Tank Bigsby, Brenton Strange, these top draft picks for the team, give you an idea of what they bring in and give you insight on all that. And then if the team brings in free agents, we'll talk about it. We'll have live streams. We'll go over training camp when it happens, rookie mini camp, all that stuff. But that's kind of the plan at this point. Things are going to die down in the NFL, a week from now or whenever it is. It's just the nature of this time of year. But, that's kind of what we're going to be looking at. So I appreciate it, guys. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And finally, go Jags.